Most investors love off-plan real estate projects here in Dubai. They come with easy transactions, attractive payment plans, and of course, a brand new building. However, there is a catch to this. Of course, you're going to need to wait until the building is constructed. In most instances, the project is going to take 3, 4, or even 5 years to hand over, which during that period you will not be receiving a rental yield and you won't be able to stay in the property as well, of course. In Dubai, around 70% of the transactions are being made off-plan, and unlike in the UK and other areas, the developments haven't handed over yet. So in the UK, for example, you would be able to pick your new build house and shortly after it pick up the keys. However, here in Dubai, you're waiting multiple years, as we've mentioned. Recently, we sold a few units in Chelsea residences which sold out on the day. However, the handover is actually Q4 2029. So it's extremely demanded, which typically means you can't buy a brand new property directly from the developer on handover, as it's likely already been purchased many years ago. So how can you invest off-plan, whether you're an investor and an end user, and get your property in a shorter time frame, let's say less than 2 years ideally? Well, here at GenZone, we've recently sold a unit to bypass that for one of our clients. The way that we've been able to do this is through the developer Benatti. So Benatti were founded in 2008 by Dr. Hussein Benatti. Their first development handed over in 2016, and to date they have more than 60 projects delivered or currently under construction across Dubai and the region itself. To give you an idea of what they have handed over in the first half of the year alone, well, we've seen 5 buildings hand over and just over 1,400 units. So Benatti is a Dubai-based developer, and they're very famous for their exterior designs. They're very bold, modern, sharp looking, as we can see here from a few of their designs. The interiors tend to be very modern to match the exterior of the building, with up-to-date designs and very bright units. Currently, Benatti are focusing on the apartment sector of the real estate market, and what they tend to do is launch multiple projects in one location. We've seen them do this in GVC, Business Bay, Al Jaddaf, and now Science Park. So as we mentioned at the beginning of this video, the reason that Benatti is an interesting developer in this circumstance is because the other large developers, Nikhil, Emaar, DAMAC, Sobha, they all take a lot longer to develop their projects, typically between 3 to 5 years for handover. Whereas what sets Benatti apart from these developers is their pace of construction and their handover dates. So typically Benatti will take around 18 months to hand over the project. It will always be under 2 years if it is one of their standard projects. In some instances, they do have projects that have an extremely short handover. So currently in September 2025, we have a project coming in Al Jaddaf called Pinnacle. This is unheard of in Dubai, to actually build the project and be very near completion and then launch it, because of course they're paying for the cost of development up front. As we mentioned, typically the projects are under 2 years and around that 18-month mark. However, they do have luxury buildings also. So currently we do have under construction the Bugatti residences, we have Mercedes-Benz, and we also have Jacob & Co. So these launches do take a little bit longer to hand over, as of course there's a lot more expenses in the project, a lot more care and detail into the process. So you're probably thinking, how are Benatti handing over the building so quick? And also, how are they outperforming the other developers that have been in the game for a lot longer? So first of all, it's due to their focus on the areas and plots that they're developing on. So as we've mentioned, typically they'll pick a location, let's say JVC, and they'll purchase plots in JVC. They're then just building the tower on its own. They're not having to think about building the master community. So Emaar, for example, when they're building in Dubai Hills, let's say, they have planned up the master community. So they need to be very careful on what developments they put where, and also the planning of it all. So this takes more time rather than Benatti just buying a plot and building exactly what they want in that location. So next up, they have very aggressive project management. I can say that I see it here firsthand. As you can see, This building is just behind me, and constantly we have workers here of such a high volume working crazy hours. Next up is their standardized design approach. So throughout JVC, I know that we keep on going back to it, however there's many Bugatti developments there, and what you can see across them all is they have very similar designs, both externally and internally. What this allows Bugatti to do is very much use the same materials, similar designs, and be cost effective. Not only cuts down the cost, but the planning and execution time. Here we can see in the video, this is a comparison of Benatti Corner versus Benatti Amber. So you can see that you have in both units those floor to ceiling windows, you have the countertops, a lot of nice modern finishing in the buildings, but they are very similar. From this information, let's have a look at it from an investor's perspective. First of all, the pros. So of course, if your building is going to hand over in a short period of time, let's say 18 months, then we're not waiting too long for the rental yield. That will fill an investor confidence that they won't need to wait long to start getting some money back from their investment. Secondly, if you're buying as an end user, you may only be buying into the project 18 months in advance of it handing over, which means that you can be confident of the designs, the amenities, that everything that's put in place will be modern and up to standard as it hands over, versus something that may take up to 4 to 5 years to hand over, which might not be quite as special once it does. So next up is how unique the developer is in terms of these handover times. It is really something that when you think of a fast development, you think of Bugatti. So this puts them in a spot in the market where there's not many competitors. If someone needs a quick handover time, this is where you would go. So next up is resale value. So off-plan projects are best typically to sell around a year after handover, or potentially on handover itself. What this allows is only 18 months between the period of you purchasing the property, and then you can potentially look to sell it in the next year or so from there and get out if that's your strategy. Even then, if you're selling during construction, then the new buyer knows that they've not got long until the property hands over. This is a lot easier than selling something that has 3 to 4 years till handover. So cons with Bugatti, something to be wary of first of all is the volume of developments that they may pick up in the location that you're purchasing in. So to give an idea, Bugatti has multiple projects in JVC that are all very similar. What this could potentially do is supply too much stock that is very similar, which will decrease the demand and potentially the pricing of not only your unit, but the rent that you may receive. Next up, as I mentioned, they do have some luxury projects and some more affordable projects, Bugatti. So the quality has been known to vary, as you would assume. However, just keep this in mind and understand what project you're actually buying into. Let's have a look now at some figures to see how the Bugatti investments have actually performed in a couple of different areas. So first up, I have picked Benatti Corner, which is in JVC. JVC doesn't have a particular view, and there's a lot of buildings in here that would likely produce a similar performance. However, so Benatti Corner was launched in October 2022, and we've seen the handover in June 2024. So again, hitting that magic number of 18 months for the development, which is such a speedy timeline in terms of if you see the towers that they're building, some of them are 20, 30 floors high, for example. During the period, as we can see here from the graph, from launch to current date, the price per square foot has increased by 68%, which is a really high amount. JVC has been somewhat an up and coming area and the most transacted area in Dubai. So this is potentially why we've seen such a great increase here, but it's also to do with the project itself and the value that it offers. Another comparison of how they've performed, we've got Benatti Trillionaire, which is here in Business Bay. It is targeted to be one of their more sort of luxury towers, not as much as the branded residences. However, it does sit over the canal and typically has a pool on your balcony. This launched in January 2024, and we've seen it hand over in June 2025. So again, hitting that sort of time frame of 18 months, which Bugatti really pride themselves on. So the price per square foot increase on this one is a little bit less, so it's at 16% over 2 years, which is still great. However, it's in Business Bay, which is a much more developed community than JVC. So it's something that we can probably expect, because when you're buying off plan, you're better buying into an area that's somewhat up and coming than already developed. Again, here's data of one of the units that could be generated in March 2024 from the launch in January, so that was at 1.51 million, and then that recently sold at 1.65 million, just to give some evidence of the average increases seen in this project. So my overall thoughts on Bugatti. Well, they're in a very unique position. Currently, they're delivering projects at nearly half the handover time of many of their developers, which has now turned into one of the biggest pros that they have as a developer. The key for investors and end users here, though, is that despite the fast handover times and potential payment plans that you may get on the projects prior to handover, you still will need to do your due diligence on the projects that they are launching, as not everyone is valuing. As we mentioned throughout the video, you need to understand what sort of quality of Bugatti development you're looking to purchase into. So to wrap this up, if you're an investor that is looking to get into the market on a payment plan and receive your rental income in, let's say, a year or two, then Bugatti could be the developer for you. And as an end user, if you're looking for a building that's going to be brand new with top amenities and built by one of the largest and reputable developers in Dubai, again, Bugatti could work for you. This is what we've just recently done with one of our clients in Sports City. If you're interested in watching more content on Dubai real estate, click the video above.